Alrighty, we are looking at two vertebrae right now. We're looking at C1 and C2, otherwise known as the atlas and the axis. These two vertebrae, they do something that is very, very unique that other vertebrae don't do. One thing I do want to mention beforehand, both of these are in the cervical region of the vertebral column, and they do have many of the same characteristics of the anatomy of other cervical vertebrae. Namely, they have the vertebral foramen. They also have the transverse foramen for blood vessels to supply blood to the brain and head. But really what we need to be focusing on is really what makes these two vertebrae unique and different. We'll start with, let's look at C1. C1 we can see on the bottom and top, there's kind of these cupped shape regions. Those are condyles. Those on the top side are used to support the skull. We can see in the skull there's a big hole, the vertebral foramen, or the vertebral magnum. This is where our spinal cord will come out of. And we can see there's some rounded processes here that this vertebrae will kind of rest on. So this bone will kind of attach right to the skull just like that, right there. It makes a firm connection. This bone, it does not move. It does not move. It stays attached to the skull. But when we look at C2, the axis, here we're looking at it from the top. This hole, ignore that hole would not be there. It would be filled in. There is a metal rod going through through it to hold things together. This is the anterior part of the vertebrae, or the front. This is the back. We know this is the back, or posterior, because this is the part that sticks out in our back when we bend over. We can see part of our spine sticking out. That's this part right here, the spinous process, characteristic of all vertebrae, with the exception of C1. Doesn't really have one. I guess it kind of does, but it's very, very minimal compared to the rest of the vertebrae. But when we look at it from the anterior view, we can see that there is something unique about this. There's this projection that comes up. This projection is known as the dens, and what it does is it kind of provides a pivot point for C1. So this can kind of attach to it like so, and now C1 has the ability to rotate. And as C1 rotates around the dens, that will allow our head to turn side to side. Notice that C2, this bone stays right in place. It is C1, which is the bone moving. That is the bone that moves. And when this bone moves, the skull that's on top of it will rotate as well.